Hey, how's it going, everyone? Before we get started into this next episode, I want to give a quick shout out to a continued supporter of the podcast, being Seth Roy of North Mountain Goshawks. And if you're in the market for a new goshawk, particularly a parent-reared North American, Russian, or Finnish goshawk for the upcoming season, definitely hit up Seth. He produces great game hawks, and the people that I know that have flown a hawk that he's produced have been very happy, and I'm sure you will be too. So hit him up at ostringer3@gmail.com, North Mountain Goshawks on Facebook, or fill out the information form at northmountaingoshawks.com and get on the list. Tell him we sent you. I'm sure you'll be happy. I also want to give a quick shout out to Brett Reese of Devils of Dirt Hawking. If you haven't checked out or aren't familiar with any of his work yet, head to devilsofdirthawking.com. He puts out a lot of cool shirts and comes up with some really cool designs and all that. I've been a big fan of his for years and was happy to be able to collaborate with him on developing new logos for the rebranding of my podcast as well. So I'm really happy with those, and I'm sure you'll be happy with a new shirt or a hoodie or whatever suits your fancy from him. If you haven't checked it out, like I said, go to devilsofdirthawking.com, get some merch from him, and show him some support. And now, on to this next episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast.
I cut the bird loose, and he, of course, goes almost 2 miles out, 1,100 feet up. And I thought, okay, well, he's, with his history of liking to fly off, which actually he didn't fly off once this year. So I thought, okay, well, he's not in the game. So I'll just go, I have to flush for the bird, or for the dog. You know, I have to honor her point. So I start running out there. Well, the minute I start running out there, the bird starts coming overhead. So obviously he's watching me. And I flush the grouse, and there were probably, I don't know, there were a lot of them. There were like 100 of them, just wave after wave. And I thought, oh man, is he coming? Is he coming? And I couldn't see him coming. He finally came and just knocked it out of the sky, but he was like still a mile away from me.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Welcome back for another episode of the Falconry Chronicles podcast, and I really hope that you've enjoyed all these episodes that have come at you from Wyoming. There's a lot of great falconers that reside there, a lot of collective knowledge, a lot of great history and stories. I really hope that you've enjoyed listening to some of them, and I really hope that you've gotten something out of them, and I've really enjoyed bringing them to you. It's been fun to listen back to and edit also. I've forgotten about some of the things that were discussed before, and that's one of the cool things about editing these episodes again after a period of time goes by, kind of reliving those conversations and all that. So it's been a lot of fun. But anyway, while I was out in Wyoming, I got a chance to stay with Kyna and Vahe for a little while in between work days and all that kind of stuff. And I wanted to get Kyna on here because she's had an interesting introduction into falconry, and just her first handful of years, she's gotten to experience and do a lot of things that a lot of falconers either don't ever get to do or very rarely get to do. And so I kind of wanted to see what it was like for her, getting a crash course and learning about propagation and sage grouse hawking and all kinds of different stuff that a lot of people don't get a chance to do sometimes ever. So learning all that as a new falconer and, kind of seeing how that was like for her, I thought was pretty interesting. So, as always, we're just going to jump right in here and get into this conversation with Kyna Sturges, and there's lots more cool stuff coming at you from other areas here in the coming weeks, as always. So, stick around, stay tuned, and here we go. Well, good morning. It's nice to always wake up in the frozen tundra of Wyoming, I guess, right?
This is true.
Yeah. Any day we wake up and look out the window and see just a lot of sage and frost on sage and everything else. It's not a bad thing.
No.
So I mean, as far as whenever you came out here, I mean, how long did it take you to kind of adjust to all this scenery? And we've had kind of these conversations amongst ourselves the last couple of times I've been up here. But I mean, as far as your overall, like, I don't know, was it kind of culture shock for you when you came out here a little bit?
Not necessarily. I grew up in Blaine County, Idaho, which is somewhat similar. So I've always loved, the sagebrush and the mountains. So as far as that was easy. But we're in the middle of nowhere. So that was a little hard to get used to.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what kind of, out of curiosity, what kind of things did you like to do on the Norm, where you used to live and, kind of where you grew up and stuff that you can't really do on the Norm here?
Well, before I moved here, or before I got into falconry, I was into horses. So, and I haven't been on a horse since I discovered falconry. Well, once I have, but for the most part. So that's one thing that I haven't been doing since I moved here is a lot of horse work, which I'm pretty busy anyways, so it doesn't hurt my feelings too much.
Yeah.
But yeah, any outdoor activity. I grew up hunting, so I always love being outside.
Yeah. Well, like I said, it's always nice. Like I said, there's the positive things, about living out here and I can see some of the appeal. I know for me, prolonged periods of time, the winters are a deal breaker for me out here. But, was all that kind of stuff similar from where you used to live also, or?
Oh yeah. So Sun Valley, which is where I grew up in or near, it's winter at least half the year. So, so I like the winter, fortunately for me, or I would not be happy here. But the summers are just there and here are amazing.
Yeah.
Nothing over 90 generally, and beautiful sunsets, beautiful sunrises. It's just paradise all day long in the summertime.
Yeah, for all 2 months of it, right?
Well, yeah.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to work out here during those couple of summer months. And, like I said, if it was like that, maybe more like, I don't know, at least 4 to 6 months out of the year, then yeah, this would be like really neat, as far as living out here. It would definitely be much nicer if that was the case, but the whole 10 months of winter and it's not just the cold for me. It's more of the straight, the 40 to 60 mile per hour winds and stuff.
I was going to say probably the wind. Yeah.
It's more of the wind for me than anything, I think. But
yeah,
anyway.
it definitely puts a damper on quite a few things.
Yeah.
A lot of times.
Yeah, no, and I can see where, it would just be, I don't know, it would be hell for falconry for a large degree, I think. Really only being able to fly 2 or 3 months or so would be kind of a bummer, I think.
Yeah, that has definitely been hard.
Yeah.
Your season is cut pretty short because of the weather.
Yeah.
But it just makes you put time towards traveling.
Yeah.
So I got to travel a lot to fly my birds because I couldn't fly them here. Mm-hmm. So that makes it a positive. You have to go somewhere to fly.
Yeah. Well, so where all did you live? What other places did you live, and what did you do before you decided to move out here?
So like I said, I grew up in Blaine County, Idaho. I spent time living in Alaska when I was younger. I lived in Oregon for a while, Washington for a very short time. I think that's it. But horses were always a big draw for me. Birds when I was a teenager, and then I kind of left birds until I found them again in my 40s.
Yeah. Yeah, I can imagine, like I said, that you've listened to some of the episodes and stuff too, and horses still kind of remain this sort of enigma for me. I know very little about that world other than the fact that it can get really expensive. But yeah, it's its whole other thing. It's almost kind of you can incorporate it some, but if you're going to totally immerse yourself in one world versus the other, you almost kind of have to choose between the two a little bit.
Oh yeah. The people who do horseback with falconry is amazing to me because I can't imagine trying to be obsessed with both at the same time. Mm-hmm. Which you kind of have to be obsessed to be successful in either one of those realms, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah, it's if you want to really be dedicated to one versus the other, both types of animals need a lot of upkeep, a lot of maintenance. I can see that there's a lot of parallels
Right.
between the two worlds. But like I said, I know virtually nothing about any of it. But whenever you were into horses, though, I mean, how deep did you get into it? I mean, was it more of a surface thing, or was it more of just a...
When I was younger, probably definitely more surface. Before I got into falconry, I had done a couple years of dressage. And then I did a couple years of Western pleasure, basically. So I was assisting a trainer, so deepish. I don't know. I attempted my hand at training a couple horses, and while I'm great at groundwork, you put me on top of a horse and I'm a green rider every time. So
Gotcha. Yeah, no, I can, like I said, I'm not even going to try to begin to wrap my head around all the different specialties and subspecialties that go into, that particular world of training. I know nothing about it. Yeah. I mean, I find it intriguing, like I do a lot of other things, hearing people talk about it and stuff. But, yeah, anyway, it's a world that I know I'll never get into. So,
well, the people are just as, crazy as falconers.
Fanatical.
So,
yeah. I can imagine. And you'd almost have to be to sink that much time, effort, energy, and money.
Oh yeah.
Into any kind of animal. You're going to have to really, really be nuts about it to really want to. Yeah, just it's a lot.
Well, and as horse people, you get on top of animals that can kill you. With falconers, we deal with animals that want to kill us.
Yeah.
Maybe not always.
There is a lot of truth to that, but well, I mean, so as far as like occupational wise and things like that, I mean, you worked in healthcare for a while too, and still kind of sort of do to a degree, right?
Yeah. So I am a dental hygienist, but I just fill in at this point. So I spend a lot of my time working with the birds instead, so which is kind of nice actually. But yeah, I did dental for 20 years, I believe.
Yeah. So yeah, we about have the same amount of time into our respective professions then as each other. So that's interesting. So yeah, no, I mean it's cool talking to somebody else though that has almost that same level or same amount of time into any form of healthcare.
Right.
I mean, if you can stick in any form of healthcare these days that long, I have a certain amount of respect because I understand, being in what I've been doing for 19 years now. Wow. It's like, it just gets harder and harder every year, and especially juggling everything that we like to do with falconry and everything else around just all of the extra headache that seems to get piled on with working in healthcare, especially like each year.
Yeah.
I mean, has that kind of been your thoughts on it too? I mean,
well, in hygiene, they want you to, double your production and see more patients. And it's just all about, it's the thing I hate is that it's not always about healthcare anymore. And I didn't get into it to make, money for a doctor. I got into it to help people.
Yeah.
So I think that's the hardest part for me.
Well, and I think that's the hardest thing for people to, I think that's the hardest thing for people to wrap their head around whenever they expect a certain level of, I don't want to say compassion, but but a certain standard of care. I think anytime you go into it doesn't matter if it's a doctor's office, it doesn't matter if it's a hospital, it doesn't matter if it's a dentist office. I think there's a certain level of just accommodation and whatever term you want to use for it that people expect. Yeah, there's a certain level of expectations that people have when they go into these places. And what people are failing to understand, I think, is that these people that, it doesn't matter if it's, like I said, any of these entities, it's not so much about just strictly helping people anymore. As you said, it's about numbers, making money.
And I hate making people about numbers.
Yeah.
It's not fair.
And it's just, it makes it not very fun to work in sometimes. So
yes, exactly. And that's why it went from like spending my days in people's mouths to being able to spend my days looking up to the sky.
Yeah. Well, and I'm sure that was a very welcome change for you. I mean, being able to do that. And, as far as, I mean, what else, aside from the dental hygienist stuff, like what other stuff did you do for income aside from that? I mean, we had some interesting conversations about some of those things, but I mean, I know you're a pretty decent cook.
Yes.
The food's good. So, I mean, I know you did some of that kind of stuff too, right?
I did. Yeah, I did some catering for some well-to-do people. I had a couple job offers in the past to go work in LA as a private chef, and I lasted 3 days and didn't want to be in the city and didn't want to be someone's slave. So,
yeah.
So I cook mostly for my own enjoyment, but I have made some money off of it as well. So.
Yeah. Well, and how many totals? So, I mean, I know some of those odds and ends things that you did only lasted, very short amounts of time, like you said, like 3 days or whatever. But I mean, collectively, how long did you try to kind of do that as a profession or source of income?
Well, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of been, I would say, throughout most of my life. I mean, I've catered weddings for friends. I've catered different parties for people. So it's always kind of one of those in my back pocket kind of things.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's part of the whole like jack of all trades aspect of life. Yeah.
Right.
No, I can relate to that.
Well, and I grew up because I was near Sun Valley, so I grew up in a resort town. So working in those types of environments were just, par for the course of growing up in Sun Valley.
I'm sure. Yeah, I don't, like I said, it's always interesting hearing how people, work all of these different aspects of what they want to do in life and how they make money and have families and working all this stuff around, the ultimate passion that we all end up having, it seems like, and share collectively here. But, going kind of back to that a little bit, remind me again, how old were you? How young were you whenever you first started really having a fondness for raptors and getting into all this?
Raptors I didn't even discover were a thing until I was 42.
Yeah.
So, but birds were always a huge pull for me. I convinced my aunts at 9, I think, to buy me parakeets. And so by the time I was in junior high and we had the whole science fair thing, I did my science fair around breeding parakeets. So then I started breeding parakeets, and then I started trading those for cockatiels, and then I started trading those for parrots. So that was my first bird obsession. And then I went to college, and I actually didn't get back into birds until I was 42.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's interesting. And in between all that, you said and starting from a fairly early age, you were doing the horses and all that kind of stuff too, right? And dealing with horses and... Yeah, I mean, what did you have any other types of animals or anything? Also,
I was that kid that just brought a lot of animals home. So I had, snakes, turtles, mice, rabbits, gerbils, rats, birds of every kind, a cat, dogs, anything I could get my hands on to bring home. I didn't ask; I just brought them home.
Yeah. I bet your parents loved that.
Oh, I'm sure they did. I think they gave up by the time I was like 8 or so. They couldn't control my animal addiction.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems to be a common starting point for a lot of people though. Yeah. Especially when they get into, it's funny because I've talked to several other falconers too that are in the herpetologist, realm or the herp world and stuff and different things. And a lot of those people, yeah, I mean, it just doesn't matter from the time they were a kid all the way up to, now as an adult, they're just, always are surrounded by just this whole menagerie of animals, like a, private zoo in their house and stuff. But well, and as far as like, your path into falconry, I mean, kind of what led you into wanting to get into that and rediscovering that after such a big gap between like, dealing with normal, quote unquote, normal types of birds as a kid and then kind of rediscovering the world of raptors and stuff as a, 40 something year old.
Well, I I met my current partner, who's a falconer, and it was kind of one of those things. Like, I was like, oh my gosh, this is a thing? Like, I didn't even know this existed. So it was like off to the races from the day I found out that it existed. So, yeah, it's been, since I discovered them, it's basically been everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and it was, I guess, neat for you. And this is part of the reason, one of the handful of reasons why I wanted to talk to you about this stuff was because you have a different perspective and kind of how you fell into this, so to speak. You know, I mean,
Yes.
we all have different paths, and some people they know they want to do this from, you know, the moment they come out of the womb, you know, and then like some people just kind of fall into it later in life. I mean, I consider myself one of those people that kind of fell into it, discovered it through mutual friends and things like that too. So, you know, I mean, there wasn't any kind of like hesitancy or any kind of like, I don't know, like, you know, more or less like, I'm not really sure. Like, from the moment you discovered that this was a thing, though, once you saw that it was a thing, you knew that you wanted to do it. There wasn't any.
No, I don't think so. I mean, it was once I discovered that it was like an actual thing, because I love hunting. I'm a horrible shot. I can admit that. But for me, I'm like, oh, I can hunt and not worry about having to take aim. I still love to gun hunt as well. I'm just not that great at it. So it's like combining my love of hunting with my love of animals. So that was always a draw for me once I discovered it.
Mm-hmm. And remind me again, is it you're 3 or 4 years into it now, something like that?
Yes. So when did I start my apprenticeship? I think it was in it would have been 2020. Yeah, late 2020. So I trapped my first bird late 2020.
Yeah, and that was a red tail, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, which flew away on its first flight.
Well, and yeah, that happens. It happens.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
But I mean, and I can understand it even more being out here. You know, whenever you have like one day out of like 320, you know, where you don't have like 60-mile-per-hour winds and stuff. You know, it's very easy for a bird around here to just say, screw it, and just go on their way. Right.
Well, and I think that was one of the problems. It was like the first sunny day and who knows how long.
Yeah.
And she was just like, I'm out of here. Why do I want to be following this person around?
Yeah. I mean, so you, how long was it after that? And when did you trap another one shortly after that?
Yeah, I trapped another one maybe 2 weeks later or so. And it was a male. I like to say that my first bird, it was like, you know, dating boyfriends. Like the first time, like, you know, I didn't put enough training and I was, you know, I didn't give it enough sun, in my opinion. And so she flew away. So my second bird, I kept real close. You know, and then that bird was really attached and didn't want to hunt. I mean, he hunted a few mice and wouldn't hunt around anybody else. It was just, everything was uphill with this bird. So finally I cropped it up and let it go. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and once again, whenever you are as secluded as you are out here, you really only have, for the most part, one other person to really get out and do anything with, you know, and whenever you have some of the conditions that you're in, you know, getting a bird used to being around other people all of a sudden, whenever it's only around like yourself or one other person, there's all kinds of different little challenges that you have out here, especially with a red tail. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's definitely not good red tail hunting out here.
Yeah.
They're fun to fly, but the quarry is not the best.
Yeah, I can see that. I mean, like I said, there's a lot of different things. I mean, it's definitely doable, but you know, you'd have to be in certain areas, and I think around certain, you know, the circumstances would have to be right in order to really kind of have just a ton of fun with a red tail around here.
Yeah,
it wouldn't be my bird of choice for around here. But
no, well, even when I fly, you know, the Harrises out here, just for training, they're kind of bored. They don't have anything to do out here. You know?
Yeah. Well, and so what did you do after the second red tail then? So
after the second red tail, I waited until the next season, and then I did a Harris hawk for a while, which same thing, it's fun. I car hawked him a little bit, but yeah, it's definitely long winging out here.
Yeah.
So after that, I started just training some long wings, mostly for lure flying, and yeah, so that's basically what I did there. And then the following year, I started getting into my own long wings and training long wings for myself for hunting.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'm sure having, normally it's a recipe for disaster whenever someone kind of faces those initial challenges that you did and doesn't have very much success initially with the first couple of birds. Mm-hmm. and transitioning to something like a bigger long wing, either a hybrid or a gyr or even peregrine, it normally would be very difficult for someone with that in those circumstances. And so, but I mean, I think that you had a pretty decent situation though, insofar as you had someone that was already there and experienced with them to teach you. And yeah, without that, I'm sure it probably would have been pretty difficult, right?
Oh my gosh, yes, definitely. I mean, the thing is, he doesn't have any inkling to do any hawking. So all of that was done on my own. Mm-hmm. So then once I decided to get all of that out of the way, and then I started hawking with him, then I could pick up more long wing type things, which our quarry is better for that here anyways. So it kind of worked out pretty well.
Yeah. Well, and about how long do you think it took you to kind of wrap your head around the world of long wings a little bit compared to trying your initial attempts with hawks like red tails and the Harrises? Well,
I guess to be honest with you, I had more exposure because of it to long wings. So that to me was just more, what's the word I'm looking for?
Natural.
More natural, yeah. Because I started out with helping man long wings. So, that was my initial exposure. Yeah.
Well, and so, kind of go through a little bit then, what your first couple of, attempts or what your first couple of, I guess, seasons were like with trying to actually fly, some of these long wings. I'm sure despite the fact that, those come with their own sets of challenges and stuff, I'm sure it was a little bit easier trying to figure out, how to not go against the grain living out here with those types of birds though, I bet, right?
Yeah. Well, my first season really was just learning training long wings and just like building in a lure response and getting them to free flight. So it was kind of boring, I think a lot of people might think. So because I was just learning the basics of trying to train these long wings, and then you have to train them to go up, and there's obviously all different kinds of ways to do that. Maybe not all different types, but a couple different types.
Yeah.
And then, so my first season, I finally got my own hybrid. I had helped man maybe 6 to 10 hybrids with Vahe already. So, so that was actually pretty fun to me to be able to man my own bird. And then, excuse me, start to train my own bird to go up. That was fun. I don't know. I'm losing my train of thought.
Yeah. Well, as far as, going back whenever you said hybrid, just specify real quick what types of hybrids.
So what types of hybrids I helped with or what type of hybrid I have?
Well, both.
Okay. So most of them were gyr peregrine. So it would be gyr semen put into a peregrine. So I helped with those. And then that's what my bird is as well. And that seems to be my favorite so far. Of course, that's what I'm mostly exposed to. So.
Well, and it's as far as long wingers go, it seems to be the general favorite combination for most people anyway.
They're pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, have you, I mean, I know you've worked with some, plenty of other birds, insofar as, manning, training, and as far as the breeding world and stuff goes now too, but we'll get into that here in just a little bit. But I mean, is there any, what do you think? Do you think you're going to stick with the Gyr peregrines indefinitely? Or?
Probably.
Yeah.
I would love to fly a Gyr just for their personality.
Just a straight Gyr.
Right. Yeah. And then I love flying just straight peregrines for lure flying. They're such sweet birds. Mm-hmm. I really like them.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so going back to your season, or your first, actual like true season, flying, these long wings and stuff. I mean, go through the process of how that went for you, like transitioning from, your experiences with the red tails and then the Harrises, and then actually, I know you said your first kind of quote unquote season was more learning just how to train them and everything, or not even necessarily use the word train, but work with them. I mean, as far as your actual main first season really hunting with them though, I mean, just kind of detail how that went for you.
Well, if you want to talk about my main first hunting season with them, with my own bird, that would be this past season that we just finished.
Okay.
Last year was a big training season for my bird that I hunted this year, which was a lot of fun and a lot of heartache and a lot of stress, which prepared me for this season. And obviously you have to teach your bird to go up first. So teaching your bird to go up I had that bird going up 2,500 feet. Will he free fly that? No, absolutely not. But I can get him to chase something up that high. And so of course that's always a lot of like every morning you're up before the sun. You're out in the sagebrush, before the sun comes up, so you can get your bird up into the sky. And then, once you get your bird going up, then you start serving pigeons. So that went really well. But then my bird decided that he did not like to miss, like at all. So every time he'd miss, he'd fly off. And it was always 40 miles. So it was into the mountains, into the sagebrush, over the rivers, through the hills, So, but thankfully I kept up with him. I kept him honest. I didn't, offend him in any way other than just finding him after he'd flown for so long. And then this year he was just on fire. He was, after everything that I could flush for him. So
that's cool. Yeah. And so you were mainly, primarily, going after grouse and stuff, right? Yes.
Just grouse with him. Although I'd love to do other types of grouse, and I'd also love to duck hunt. Although I've heard, I don't know if this is true, but I have heard that if you don't bag your longwing on ducks the first year, they probably won't take them.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard different. I've heard. Yeah, I've heard different theories on that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and
I don't trust it unless I can
verify it, like in person.
It. Yeah,
I understand that. Yeah, and a lot of it too is so subjective, and you have to put the caveat to the fact that or an asterisk mark on the fact that. Every bird is so different, from each bird. Like each bird is so different from each other that what rule might apply to one might not necessarily apply to another. So, there might be some truth to that. I don't know. I've heard the same thing.
I'm still going to try.
Yeah. Yeah. No, like I said, why wouldn't you? At least, what it seems to be anyway is that, the avian flu thing is starting to, I don't know if it's necessarily starting to subside as far as risk or whatever, but it seems like people are becoming gradually each year slightly less worried about it. But,
right. It's starting to dissipate a little bit. And it's unfortunately something we're just going to have to deal with. It's never going to go away.
Yeah. So, as far as just going back to, so what kind of success did you have this past season? I know you managed to get some cool things accomplished this season.
I got 3 grouse this year. Would I have liked it to be more? Yes, of course. but they were very hard won, and I'm pretty proud of it.
Yeah. Well, and that was, in what, like, how many months of hawking? Like, I know, like, we've talked a little bit already about how seasons are somewhat abbreviated around here, but
Right.
when did you start, like, really hawking, and, like, when did you have to end this past season?
So we started training probably, I want to say, in August, and then the season opens in September. There's a 10-day gun season. So we still train, but we try not to train too much just because, sometimes people shoot things they shouldn't. So then after the gun season in September, then we start hawking pretty much every day. And I ended up playing a lot of games with my bird because he's really smart. So, his first bird, not his first bird, but one of the birds that he went after and didn't take was at 700 feet. So it's like for a week, he was like 700 feet right above me, 700 feet right above me. And so I had to like serve him out of position and try to get it into his head that he's got to either go out or go up, but not right above at 700, which is still pretty good. See, now that's, I'm sure I know a lot of people would love that, but.
Yeah, I mean the whole pitch thing is another one of those eye of the beholder kind of things.
I'm falling into that.
Yeah.
into that.
Yeah, you're falling into that long winger trap.
I know. I mean, but really, if I didn't care, I probably could I could get something with this bird every day, but I want him to work for it.
Yeah. So, I mean, real quick, well, actually, we'll save your favorite experience, your story for a little bit later in regards to these grouse that you caught this past season. But what I also want to talk to you about or kind of get your thoughts on was, and once again, kind of tying back into, just the experience of kind of falling into all of this stuff at once. I mean, most falconers, whenever they start to learn, they're learning in these like smaller kind of incremental steps, and their exposure to all these different worlds that exist within falconry is kind of, for the most part, on average, I think I feel confident in saying a little bit smaller, but yours, on the other hand, you come into this world where you're not only helping like pretty much right off the bat to man and work with all these other birds and also learning to hunt and stuff, but you're also learning the breeding side of all this stuff too, which is a whole other, animal, a whole other overwhelming thing. So, I mean, whenever you're trying to wrap your head around juggling all this other stuff and, learning how to hunt with these birds and work with them and everything, at what point did you feel like your head was probably going to explode whenever you working with the other side of the stuff too? Not
too bad yet, although maybe a couple years ago when I was trying to wrap my head around like the falcon egg, essentially, it sounds simple, but it's not. And then just the different time that they're, the males are giving semen, and so reading a lot of that information a couple years ago was kind of like, how in the world am I going to remember all of this? And I still don't. I still don't retain all of it. I don't know. There's different things for everything. How long it takes the egg to hatch, what kind of humidity it needs to be in. We have to weigh the eggs every day. Do they need to go into a wet incubator, a dry incubator? It's, I don't know. Maybe my mind's still exploding.
Mine would be. That's the main reason why I wanted to ask, because the thing is, I've had the opportunity now, as we've kind of talked briefly before amongst ourselves. Once again, I've had the opportunity now to see, I don't know, somewhere probably close to between around a half a dozen at least, really nice, breeding programs and projects and things. And this is even like I would consider this one to be, kind of like a moderate size one, average size or whatever. And it's hard enough to really, just as kind of someone coming in on as an outsider looking in kind of perspective, on all this and all the different things that I've seen in my short visits with you all. Being able to keep track of, monitor all the different things you have to record, be ready for some, not to mention tying that in with some sleepless nights.
And, lots of those.
I mean, it had to have, there's still some things that still have to be somewhat overwhelming to you though, I bet, right?
Yeah. I mean, when we have to stay up for 24 hours watching for an egg, that's, really hard to not get mad at your partner for anything. Because he's been up just as long as me. So.
Sure. Well, there is that. Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm used to working night shift and understand the the effects of lack of sleep just as much as anybody can, for sure. So I mean, I get it, and I understand that, with as much work and time, effort, and energy as you all put in to your birds here, I mean, you don't want to mess anything up.
Well, right. And one of the things I've really learned is like, you can mess up an imprint with anything simple. Like, because we have all these imprints and they hold grudges. Like, if you approach them wrong, if if they don't like you, they're having a bad day, they're going to hold that grudge against you. There are two birds here that they see me and they think that the world is ending because I looked at their feet one time,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So imprints, I think, take a special person to raise. I don't think that everyone should do that.
Yeah. Well, and as far as it pertains just to the timing with all these different birds and stuff too, I mean, how much of a challenge was it for you to learn, like you were kind of alluding to a little bit ago about, the timing of, some of the birds that are, kind of giving the semen and the versus the time that it's about ready to, go ahead and put that into some of the females. And I mean, do you feel like at this point you've got at least a decent grasp of it? Or do you feel like, there's still so many things that you're still trying to figure out as a...
I feel like I have an associate's degree in something that needs a master's.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough. Well, what aspects do you think you need those extra, 4 years worth of degree for?
Well, I mean, maybe not all of 4 years, but there's just so much going into like which bird comes in when. When can you put this particular semen into this particular female, and do you work them at the same time? Do you put lights on them? So I think most of that extra 4 years is just knowledge of getting to know each bird specifically, which is mind-blowing considering.
Well, and, from the perspective of, once again, kind of coming into all this the way you did, I mean, is this something that you would recommend that
No,
other people just
absolutely
jump
not.
into?
No.
Were there times that you've thought that maybe like, maybe I should have just taken a step back and not, jumped into all this like right at once and just basically...
Well, I mean, yeah, of course I think of that, but what are the options?
Yeah.
And I've gotten to learn things that people will never get to learn. Is it going to serve me in the future? I hope so.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I don't know. It's, like I said, there's a lot of things to someone that's been in all this such a relatively short amount of time to wrap their head around. And I mean, it's admirable that you went ahead and took the challenge on, and I know that there was a certain degree of, like you said, not really necessarily, maybe not even having much of a choice in the matter, but, but I mean, I guess if you really wanted to have, though, you could have just said, yeah, I'm just going to wait, and back off a little bit on this stuff and just said, sorry about you, I'm just going to.
No, that's not my personality type anyways. I'm always like feet in first all the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's cool though. I mean, I think that's where people usually end up learning the quickest though, because that's also where you're going to make a lot of the most mistakes too initially.
Oh yeah. So, yeah. I've made a couple of those.
well,
Yeah.
I mean, do you mind sharing a couple? I mean, I'm curious, like, because that part of the whole purpose in doing this is so other people can learn from other people's mistakes and stuff too. So
mistakes in breeding?
Oh, whatever. I mean, what are some of the main mistakes you think you felt in either this world or just even just the hunting aspect of things too? I mean, I'm just curious.
Well, I don't know. Where did I make my mistakes? Definitely, sometimes it's being too cautious and not just going for it. Like the bird that I couldn't get to hunt with anybody else, the bird that I, wouldn't really hunt, it just wanted to fly with me. The mistake was I kept it too close. I think that as animal people, we tend to get really emotionally attached, but our birds aren't emotionally attached to us. Mm-hmm. So that's where we get overbearing maybe. And maybe that's where I got overbearing with my bird. And so all he thought his job was to follow me. Yeah.
Yeah. You kind of, so it sounds like basically you're more or less, you overcompensated the wrong direction.
Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah. I mean, and that's a common thing that happens a lot, I think, especially whenever with falconers that lose their first bird, like the way that you lost yours when it flew off and stuff. Like, yeah, the tendency is to kind of do a 180.
Right. Now I'm going to do 3 months of tidbits to the glove.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a good example. I mean, as far as the breeding program aspect of things, I mean, what's some of the things that I mean, not even necessarily in the term of mistakes, but
learning curves.
Yeah. Like what's some of the more valuable lessons that you've learned in the short time that you've been helping this, you think?
Well, definitely it's figuring out that each bird has their own, I want to use the word desire, but that's not exactly the word I'm looking for. Each bird has their own likes and dislikes. And I think that's tendencies. Yeah. And that's kind of what we're really figuring out this year is like, there's not one fix for every bird. Every bird doesn't like the same hat. Every bird doesn't like, I have heard that there are birds that like to give semen on the shoe. So you have to put something on the shoe. So that's kind of what we're doing this year is we're really we are excelling at finding what each bird really likes. Because, one bird's going to be turned off by this hat. And because we've had a lot of our birds for a while now, we know their history. Like I know one bird won't give on a particular hat because of my fault. Generally, last year we had a hard year, and I had to keep all of the male birds fluffed, for lack of a better word. And I went into this bird's chamber with this hat, and he hated it. And ever since then, he won't come anywhere near that hat if Vahe goes in there with that hat. So I think it's just discovering that each bird really has their own desire. Quirks. There we go.
Yeah. Well, I got you. Well, and that's, like I said, that's, once again, it's another thing there's a lot of people that I think have this romanticized notion in their head that this is something that might potentially be cool and something, neat to take on for themselves.
If you'd like to give up your life. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So, and that's another good thing too. I mean, and we'll end this train of thought by going into that a little bit. Like, there's another thing when it comes to this particular world that I think that's something that people need to hear over and over again too. Mm-hmm. And if there's a common theme when it comes to any person that I know that has a breeding program, and that is basically like from this month to this month, you are basically chained to it, and you are like everything has to be about that.
Yep, this is your life, and if you don't like it, then you're in the wrong place.
Yeah, and I'm like I said, I mean, it's I figured that you all's deal was no exception either with all of this stuff, because I mean, like I said, I know how dedicated you all are to making this work and keeping it going and stuff, and I mean, so as far as that time frame for you all, I mean, from what month to what month, pretty much, are you straight up like on guard 24/7?
So basically, January is a little bit normal. February starts ramping up. March 1st, it's like go time. So we're pretty much chained here from March until I think we start pulling birds in June, somewhere in there. So, and then it's training. So, and then we have to fit work in there somewhere too. So,
yeah. Well, and I mean, it's so, man, like I said, it's important for people to hear consistently over and over again that think they may want to, may want to get into this someday. I know it's something that I don't think I'll ever be able to.
Right.
At least,
And back to the mistakes really quick, maybe not a mistake or a learning curve, is that one thing that we have discovered is that pulling your bird is so important. Like the way you pull your bird really tells how your season's going to go. Well,
define or just clarify a little bit what pulling your bird means.
So when we take a bird out of the chamber with its parents, we don't want it to see a face. We don't want it to see hands. We don't want it to see anything it's going to associate humans with, because then they have this fear factor. So even when you're pulling your first, your bird after the molt, we discovered that you shouldn't pull your own bird, because if that bird sees your face and associates that with fear, when that bird leaves your fist, it has that split second of, oh my God, and it messes up your hunt or your flight. Personal opinion, but we try to be really careful about that.
Yeah. Well, and that's something similar that I've heard, from other people as well. And I mean, I'm sure that there's a certain degree of truth, the approach and how people go about doing that is going to obviously vary from,
right,
opinion person to opinion to person, but and once again, falconers and their opinions, but,
yes, there's a lot of them.
But well, cool. I mean, and like I said, I wanted to get your perspective on a lot of this stuff, because you getting into all this stuff has been a very unique way of getting into all this stuff. So, I mean, there's not very many people that get just exposed or thrown into all this whole, all these different aspects in such a short amount of time.
And still like it.
And still, and not end up just hating not only everything and everyone but themselves too. And, so I mean, it's cool. It's very admirable that that's the way your personality type is, and you like taking on all this stuff, and you like the challenge of it. It's pretty cool. But, well, going back again to story time now, so I do want to hear, I mean, which of those few grouse flights that you had was like one of your more memorable? I mean, like, which of those was kind of like that defining moment for you where you could just like finally just be like, I accomplished what I set out to do a little bit, and we're just, it was kind of like that moment for you, so to speak.
So definitely, I mean, I remember all three of my grouse flights, obviously, but my first one was definitely my favorite. And I was out by myself, and I had Hazel, our youngest pup, out. She's an English pointer. And we usually put the dog out, and then we follow behind in the truck, because they can be, a mile ahead of us. And the wind was just wrong. It was coming from behind me. And I could tell she was birdie. I could tell she knew there was something. So I got her turned around. Took me about a mile to turn her around, and came back to that spot. And she went way out, like a mile out, and locked up. And I thought, okay, great. So, and there's no way for me to get out there. So I thought, okay, well, whatever, I'll do it anyways. So I cut the bird loose, and he, of course, goes almost 2 miles out, 1,100 feet up. And I thought, okay, well, he's, with his history of liking to fly off, which actually he didn't fly off once this year. So I thought, okay, well, he's not in the game. So I'll just go, I have to flush for the bird or for the dog. I have to honor her point. So I start running out there. Well, the minute I start running out there, the bird starts coming overhead. So obviously he's watching me. And I flush the grouse, and there were probably I don't know, there were a lot of them. There were like 100 of them, just wave after wave. And I thought, oh man, is he coming? Is he coming? And I couldn't see him coming. He finally came and just knocked it out of the sky, but he was like still a mile away from me. I think it was 3/4 of a mile. So I hiked my butt out there and picked him up. And yeah, it was one of the best moments, just seeing that bird on that grouse. Like, I did it. It was pretty epic for me.
I bet. And especially doing it all, I mean, finally culminating everything to the point where you're able to do all this stuff fairly independently and achieving all this stuff without really any inside, or I should say without any, outside input, and I'm sure that was very gratifying, finally having that moment where it all came together for you. And I mean, we all have those. I think every falconer, for the most part, remembers like that first moment where everything kind of connects.
It just comes together. Yeah. And our, Hazel, it was like my first bird with her. So, I mean, I'd shot birds with her, but it was my first falconry bird with her. So that was really awesome too.
Yeah, man. It's always even more compounded whenever you have a dog or another, aspect of everything that normally can be even more complicated or whatever, but when it all comes together, it's just, especially whenever you've got another dog or something else like that, and it's that extra little step of enjoyment, involved with all of it. So very cool. Well, like I said, before we wrap up, I want to go ahead and get that kind of like at least from your perspective, and which is definitely a a unique perspective, just get that piece of advice from you that you think would, you would be worthy of passing along to either current or future generations of falconers. And then we can come close to wrapping up and let you get on with the rest of your morning.
I think one of my biggest pieces of advice would be to not be afraid to reach out to other falconers. I think that we get so much in our head that we're going to be judged by other falconers, or we're going to be looked down upon for asking for advice. And I can tell you that I have a lot of people that I've reached out to, for advice, and I'm always thankful for it. But we get in our own heads about doing that.
Yeah. Well, and understandably so, because there's so many people that we don't have a chance to meet up with in person, get to know beforehand. I mean, there's a lot of, especially whenever you're reaching out to people you don't know, there's a lot of just blind trust factor, and whenever you don't really know anything about or have seen someone's falconry in person and stuff, sometimes it's really hard to know, who some of the best sources would be to go to for that kind of stuff.
That is a really good point, actually.
Yeah.
You don't know what advice you're going to get.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's definitely something for people to continue to consider, especially in the world that we live in nowadays, where said advice can be had from pretty much anybody from anywhere at the touch of a fingertip.
Yes.
So, but well, cool. I mean, and before we finish up, I mean, what else do you hope to be able to do for your falconry and stuff over these next couple of years? I mean, I know you want to stick with your peregrines, but I mean, out of all these different types of birds that you're trying to make and produce and stuff, I mean, what's the next temptation for you?
Well, the bummer about life is that time is a finite resource. So, because I would fly every bird. Repeat the question. Sorry.
What else do you want to try?
I really would love to fly a gyr, mostly, like I said, for their personality. But I just want to keep being successful with my hybrids. I might fly another hybrid this year. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay. Fair enough. Well, yeah, I mean, and that's good. I think just from my perspective anyway, which I mean doesn't really mean anything, but
not true.
from my point of view, it's kind of nice, like, and you might not be able to appreciate this at least for a little while longer or whatever, but it's good that you have a more narrow focus in that regard. Yeah. Because it's so easy, and especially with all of this that you have at your disposal right now, like it's so easy to want to just do all of those things.
Oh yeah, I want to get into micro hawking.
But I mean, it's good that you want to stay focused on one particular thing for a while. I mean, instead of falling into the trap that a lot of us, including myself, fell into early on, where you do want to do everything, you know. So, but well, I mean, thanks for taking the time to do this and share that perspective of yours. And it's always good coming out and hanging out with you all and seeing all your birds and I mean, especially being out here whenever you don't want to be and have to be for work and things like that, I mean, it's nice being able to hang out with other friends and stuff and help pass the time. So I know myself, I'm very appreciative for y'all letting me come up and hang out and stuff. And
we love having you come out.
Yeah, it's always a good time. So, yeah. And but yeah, is there any last thought that you have or anything before you want to start feeding more animals and doing other stuff?
I don't think so.
Fair enough. Okay, well, I'll go ahead and call this good then, and you can go back to trying to collect more peregrine semen and inseminating birds and everything else.
Eggs are important too.
Yeah, and eggs, taking care of eggs and everything else. So awesome. I appreciate you.
Thank you.